Silent Cut watched over the daughters through the night, keeping them on task finishing the walls. She kept one eye on the human who worked with her elixirs and trinkets. Eventually the human put away her things and curled up in the weave of odd silks, falling asleep in the finished corner. She reached up with her lower right hand, deactivating the rectangle, and walked over to Gorpul. "Daughter?" Gorpul bowed, focusing on her mother. "The town. You saw a leader? It wasn't her, correct?" Gorpul looked up, slightly widening the whites of her eyes. "That is correct, mother. The Dahlia human spoke of an owner. We will need to meet with whoever rules them." She turned her eyes over her daughters. "We will need to be stronger, though, a show of force. They cannot think we are weak." Gorpul lowered herself slightly. "What?" the mother asked. They do things I cannot describe, mother. Their nest is unlike anything I can describe." "You will teach me when we go. Do not be afraid, daughter." Gorpul raised her head up, looking at her mother with all four eyes. "They do as she says. They control forces beyond. Our bodies overmatch theirs, but their magic is out of our understanding." Silent Cut chittered. "Only part correct." She turned an eye toward the sleeping human. "You did well bringing this one. She knows things, thinks out loud, helps me learn." She turned another eye toward her. "There, science is learning, testing, and observing." She chittered a bit more. "We are good at observing." Dahlia woke up to the smell of meat cooking. She rubbed her eyes and found the older male in front of her, bowing with a chunk of cooked meat offered in his extended hands. She smiled and took it. "Thank you." The creature didn't move. She looked around and noticed the lack of the mother xenoarch. "Yeah, you can't understand me. Okay. Well, I guess stay there," she said with a laugh, and proceeded to eat her breakfast. The balding male stayed motionless as she ruffled through her sack while chewing. She pulled out her coffee kit and wound the heating coil. She sat the meat chunk on a leaf nearby and got up. Dahlia walked across the room and touched a sagging portion of the roof with the empty pot extended. The water cache drizzled out into her pot while she looked out the open window. It was still sprinkling outside, the red sun casting a pink light through the clouds. She went back over and filled the coffee maker, setting it to brew. She reached over and tapped the bowing male. "Stop that. Sit. Eat." She motioned to her mouth, and then broke a piece of meat off for him. "Eat with me?" The male raised his eyes up and took the chunk. He watched as she manipulated the devices, making a brown liquid. She took out 2 caps from her sack and poured them full of the liquid. She handed one cap to him before making some garbled noises. He took it, watching her as she sipped her cap. He put a mandible in, tasting it, bitter. He then lifted several drops into his mouth, feeling the warmth. His eyes widened and he bobbed his head. Dahlia laughed. "Good. You better hope it works, buddy." She watched him as she drank hers and finished her chunk of meat. "All right, you're dosed, bud. Here goes nothing." She reached over to her test kits and pulled a swab out, dipped it in a tube, and then turned back towards him. She leaned over and touched the swab to his forehead. "Don't die on me, okay?" The male watched her with 2 eyes as she touched him with the white, fuzzy stick. He refocused on her while taking another sip of the brown fluid. He finished his chunk as politely as he could, waiting to take his last bite now that hers was done. She sat watching him for a while, noting time increments in her data pad. "All right, good so far." He got up to leave and she mirrored him, putting a hand on his shoulder while shaking her head. "Need to observe you. You can't go anywhere until I'm sure you're in the clear." He shook his head in pantomime. "You have no idea." She sighed. "Don't leave." She pushed him back down, taking his cap. She refilled hers and his. "Drink some more." He watched as she reached back into her bag and pulled out a yellow object. With another object, she cut the yellow thing in half. He focused his eyes on it as she took one half, squeezed it in her fluid, and then took the other half to squeeze into his. She then handed it to him. He took it, tasted it, noting a bright new flavor. Dahlia chuckled as he shook his head at the added lemon. "I didn't realize until I was much older that humans don't drink coffee like this." She looked down into her drink. "Owner started it with me to ward off scurvy." She looked back up at him. It knew I drank coffee religiously and just started a thing with me. You like it? He listened to her as he slurped up the fluid, her words nonsensical. He chittered while she moved around the room. His eyes wandered, watching the flat surfaces as they started to breathe. Mother Silent Cut entered through the opening of the cube. She looked around and noticed her mate wobbling where he sat. The poison? Dahlia, upon hearing the translator, looked up at her. She stopped working on her test rack and stood up, shaking her head. No. She chuckled a bit. I did something stupid. Silent Cut looked over at him with 3 eyes. He is not right. What did you do? Dahlia raised up a hand as she took a deep breath before pacing toward him. Well, this was supposed to be a controlled test and I fucked it up. I made an assumption without verifying. She looked back towards the tall Xenoarch female. I just ran some blood equivalent tests and made another discovery. Another? Well, yeah. One in a long string of things I've learned here. Citrus oils. Well, they don't really exist here and I didn't even think about it. She ran her hand through her hair, sighing. The ghost test is confirmed. He's not affected by it, not with the antidote in his system, but the lemon is affecting him, and I don't have any way to know exactly what will happen. Silent Cut looked at him. Foulness, I stepped in. Are you okay? The old male looked up at her, his head swaying. You have a shine, mother of my heart. I never noticed it before. You glow with sparkling lights. Dahlia listened and knelt beside him. How are you feeling? He looked over at the human, her eyes spreading out, multiplying into the 4 they should be. How do I feel? The translator interpreted. I feel good. My body. He raised a hand up, spreading his 3 fingers back and forth. Pain is gone. His eyes darkened. The drink! Did you give me the quiet death? He looked over at his mate. Am I too old for you? Did I not serve you well? He started shaking. I work hard for you. Dahlia took his hand, regretting it as he squeezed back. No, you're not going to die. Look at me. He refocused on the human. Your eyes. You will be one of us. You will see as we do. Dahlia shook her head, staring at him. You are not dying. You are going to be fine. She looked over at Silent Cut. Citrus oils break down in people within 3 hours. They don't do this to us, but I don't know how long it will take in him. Silent Cut knelt next to him, focusing all 4 eyes into his. You are speaking strange things. You see these things? He widened his eyes at hers. Your eyes glow. He chittered. Like ovens, hungry ovens opening up to eat. You're always hungry, mother. I feed you. I have always fed you. She reached up to touch his face and Dahlia slapped her hand away. Silent Cut turned her eyes, hissing at the human. You attack me! In my nest! Dahlia backed away in a jerk as Silent Cut started rising. The ghost is on his face! I was trying to help you! Silent Cut heard her words and stopped rising. That is not stupid. You are smart. She turned 2 eyes back toward Foulness. I stepped in. Dahlia stood up, out of her reach, muttering, And this isn't technically your nest! Silent Cut heard the whispered translation and hissed. These things, he sees, they are part of your science magic? Dahlia, wary of her, walked on the other side of him, making her way to her test kits. I'm pretty sure he's hallucinating. The lemon juice is making his mind connect things in abnormal ways. She laughed. 2 tests in 1. Hopefully it's temporary, no brain damage. Silent Cut looked at her, focusing 3 dark eyes on her face. When will your test be over? Dahlia shrugged and pointed at the male. Depends on him. Chemical processes take time to work out outside of my control. The ghost antidote, will it be ready? Dahlia turned toward her, arms crossed. So far, we only know it works on males for certain. I need a female to test it on. It would suck if we put our faith in it and it ends up killing your daughters when they try and use it. Silent Cut hissed again. Look, I have blood tests running here. It looks like it should run exactly the same, but there is always a chance. A chance of killing us. Well, yeah, it's a small chance, but there's a chance I'm missing something. This is all experimental. This, your science, you don't really know? She took a step closer, 2 eyes focused on the test kits. What did they tell you? How do you read your elixirs? Dahlia sighed, touching her forehead. Science, it is never absolute. We're dealing with an infinite universe. She groaned slightly. I don't even know if you have a concept of infinite yet. She looked at the mother. With a large enough data set, anything can happen, like anything. Crazy odds. Genetics is all about adding small changes to life forms. Something that works for an entire population for 10,000 years could end up killing a kid with a genetic deviation. That happens in everything. Permutations are a constant throughout everything, but most likely it will protect you. But you need to test it, on females. Dahlia nodded. Adds to certainty, yes. You will assist us this afternoon. Dahlia stared at her. I am assisting you, right now. Silent Cut looked at her with all four eyes. We cannot risk the long strings you devised. One slip, and we may experience the painless death. You, however, are not at risk. You can use the long-range arrows. You will assist us in a raid. A raid? Dahlia asked. Your kind has weakened my nest. Cousins have come, taken my sons, my mates, my brothers. The sisters of my nest, hungry and weak, have left to join larger, safer nests. You today will help me reclaim my stature. Dahlia smiled. All right, I'm down. She turned and looked over at the older male, his eyes looking around the rectangular space. I want to run some lemon tests, too. She looked back at Silent Cut. This could be fun. Mother Silent Cut stood on the upper branch of the tallest border banat tree. She strummed her foot, causing her females to scatter around the stranded trees, each taking a predefined position. She focused an eye the human. Dahlia, you can do this? She laughed. Been sniping squishies since I could run. Silent Cut widened her eyes and tapped the attack signal into the wood. Gorpul lowered herself from a lower overhanging branch, landing on the foreign wood. She looked about, scanning, feeling, and tapped the declaration of war. She tapped for several minutes before focusing eyes in a direction. She strummed on her anchor line, letting her sisters know they were about to engage. They are coming, Silent Cut said. Dahlia looked through the trees. Where? I don't see them yet. Silent Cut tapped, then waited for response. 3 stands and closing, full stride dropping from uppers quickly. They know it is us and are rushing in without fear. Dahlia nodded and kept watching. The first sign she saw was a fully leaved branch end cracking under the weight of a large female landing on it. Got one! Oh wow, she's big. Use your tool then, that will be her. Crusher? Yes, she will be leading them. Dahlia watched as the large mother bounded across the branches, cracks and roars echoing across the trees. She aimed, pulling the bow strand back, waiting for a clear shot. She let loose, firing the goo-tipped arrow. It hit a branch and dropped down into the murk below. Silent Cut noted the movement nearing her daughter. She is scared. Hopefully she doesn't flinch. Dahlia looked at Gorpul as she notched another, then refocused on the lumbering mother. She saw an opening in the path, close to Gorpul. She waited, pulling the string taut. She took in a breath, feeling the muscles in her back twitch in anticipation. She held until Mother Crusher crossed through the gap in the foliage and launched, preempting her movement. The arrow made impact with her torso, dropping off and falling into the waters below. The mother kept bounding on all 8 legs, charging toward Gorpul. Dahlia watched the impact, noting it. Tell her not to touch her side. It impacted, should knock her out in a few moments. Silent Cut strummed on the branch, watching the movement. A few moments and she will be ripped in half. She strummed more commands. The other sisters moved toward the anchor line. Quiet Bite extended a hand down and Gorpul took it. She pulled her up as the enraged mother reached the thick of the branch. Mother Crusher hissed loudly, shouting in her speech. Cowards! Come to test me! Silent Cut's translator parroted in human. She chittered loudly. You starving yet? Come to steal from me? She reached up, grabbing toward Gorpul's leg. Little girls, we have lots of food. You're welcome to feast with me. Give me your mother and I'll take you in. Simple. Dahlia watched as a dozen more females appeared in nearby branches. Silent Cut's eyes noted the movement, spinning to focus on them. Dahlia looked at one nearby on an opposite branch, focusing on them. Want me to tag her? More test subjects, more accuracy correct? Silent Cut replied. Dahlia smiled and notched another arrow. She shot it, hitting the female in the face. The female hissed across the pruned gap as she pulled the goopy stick off of her. Playing with toys? She stared with all four eyes at Silent Cut. Dropping sticks on us? She looked up into the branches above, unable to see any that they could have dropped from. Silent Cut whispered to the human. She didn't see you. Your magic worked. Dahlia laughed, scratching at the mud on her arm. Old human trick. Break apart lines. She reached down into the quiver and pulled another arrow out of the goo at the bottom. She notched it and looked along the territory line. She noted Mother Crusher. She's moving funny. I see. Silent Cut replied. She thrummed Gi Dr to act. Gay Dr farther below stretched the sticks and weaves out under the chosen battle branch. The two other small sisters moved to assist in binding the catch net in place. Mother Crusher saw them far below and hissed incoherent defiance just before losing her balance. Dahlia took the opportunity as the opponent's eyes all followed their matriarch down. She launched an arrow, dabbing another in the rear. She quickly restrung and launched another arrow, dabbing a smaller female above them. Silent Cut didn't notice the volleys. Her eyes and limbs focused on feeling the catch. Mother Crusher was flailing, slowing, caught in their territory. She strummed care for her side, but to bind her. Gadr moved, restraining herself from full-on attacking, but rather binding the enemy mother with the last of her strands. Silent Cut chittered as she was bound. She focused her eyes out at the movement in the trees and shouted, "We have Mother Crusher! Others of your ilk will die soon, and you will know loss as we have. We have human magic, magic beyond your eyes, beyond your touch to fathom. Feel your sisters, catch them before they fall. Come, beg of me, and they do not need to die. Bow eyes shut, and I will save you." Hisses came from the trees. Dahlia watched as the one tagged in the face started staggering. The hisses died down as they felt her awkward movements. One stepped out on a branch into the gap, a taller female. "Evil witch! This is treachery!" Dahlia stood up and walked toward the edge of the branch, a hand holding onto an upright shoot. "Turn up your volume," she said toward Silent Cut. The mother waited a moment before doing as she said. Dahlia cleared her throat and then shouted, "I am Dahlia Strong, apprentice of Gorpul, daughter of the owner, come from beyond the Everlights. I can strike you all where you perch, give you the painless death of the ghost. Let you drop into the waters for the funga to devour." Hisses came from the opposite trees as they listened to the translator echoing through the forest. Or, you can heed Mother Silent Cut. Take her offer as matriarch. Serve her and gain mercy. Serve her and gain life again. The hisses quieted and the staggering one up above stepped forward. I don't want to die yet. Please." Silent Cut motioned toward an extended branch nearby. "Drop my daughter. The witch will save you." She bowed her head, darkening her eyes, and crept slowly to the tip of the branch. She anchor-lined down, landing on the branch, wavering. She attached the line, allowing her sisters to see into the enemy territory. She tried focusing, watching as the moving dark shapes crept along the branch toward her. Dahlia hung, walked out toward the failing Xenoarch, and knelt down. The female struggled, her arms shaking at the human to fend her off. Dahlia laughed. "Open your mouth." Silent Cut hissed loudly nearby. "Open your mouth, wench!" The female opened up, spreading her mandibles. Dahlia dropped an antidote orb into her mouth and then poured water over her face. She then turned back toward the trunk, moving into the foliage. The enemy nest held tight, feeling the sister through the anchor line. Her tremors eased and she sat up. She looked back toward her sisters. "The death is fading. It's true," one of the lower ones hissed. "I'd rather die, witch lover." Silent Cut stood taller, moving so they could feel her through the attached line, strumming. "You are free to do so." Eyes watched as she eventually stammered and fell from her branch, landing with a splash far below. Mother Silent Cut stood at the top of the stairs in the heart of her nest. She looked down with two eyes on the comatose Crusher on the bottom step. The other two eyes scanned the bowed sisters from the other territory. Her daughters stood behind them, ready to attack. She rose up. "You have submitted yourselves. Do you offer your males to our nest?" The one saved by Dahlia looked up at her. "We will." "You will? You will not hurt us anymore?" Silent Cut chittered. "Oh no, you will hurt one last time." She motioned toward Dahlia in the corner. Dahlia stepped forward with a cut lemon half in each hand. Mother Silent Cut stretched even taller. "Raise your heads and open your mouths. Make it through this test, and you will rise as my daughters." Dahlia looked up at her and then at the first of the initiates. The female raised her head up, all four eyes focused on the human. Dahlia reached over her open mouth and squeezed lightly, dripping several drops of juice into her mouth. She nodded and went to the next, repeating the process. She eventually made her way down the line and stopped at the end. Silent Cut descended the stairs, watching. The room was silent as the effects started. Their eyes started wandering and their fingers began to fidget. The mother chittered. "My new daughters, look at me!" Their eyes struggled, aligning on her. "See me for what I am!" The shivered, lowering themselves as she towered above them, the hallucinations starting to take hold. "I am your queen, eater of all, heat of the oven, your matriarch. Your mother." They all bowed, eyes transfixed on her. Silent Cut focused on Gorpul. "Take a finger from each, so they remember." Gorpul widened her eyes and reached behind the first, grabbing a bound hand. She wrenched a finger free, causing the victim to shriek, and then moved to the next. Dahlia tensed at the violence. Silent Cut looked at her with an eye. "You like to take samples, don't you?" Dahlia nodded slightly. "Good." She focused at the passed-out Crusher. "Wake her." Dahlia walked over to the motionless Xenoarch. "Those straps will hold?" Silent Cut stared at her. "You doubt my strongest weaves?" Dahlia shook her head and forced an orb into Crusher's mouth. It took a moment, but eventually Crusher shook awake. "What happened? Where am I?" She struggled, her limbs flailing in unison against the lashings. Silent Cut stood over her, two eyes focused, the other two focused on the tripping daughters. "You are strong, always have been," Crusher hissed slightly. "I could use you, or we can feast upon your defeat. What do you choose?" Crusher looked over at her contorting daughters. "What have you done to them?" Silent Cut chittered, pointing at the human. "Witch magic." She focused all four eyes on her, then kicked her face. "Death or subservience, chose." "Why would you want me? You're not foolish enough to let me live. I'd kill you with a chance." Silent Cut looked over at Dahlia with an eye. "Strong as you are, there are others stronger. As much as I hate you, there are others I hate more. You are evidence of my failures." She looked back down at her with all four eyes. "I am learning. I must learn from my failures, and I wish to learn from you." Crusher thought for a moment. One eye focused on Silent Cut, the other three scanning the room. "I will not live here. Nor do I want you to. I can keep my nest. You can keep a nest and two males. You will be taken care of. Your mass will serve my efforts. You will head my call?" Crusher bowed her head, shrinking the whites in her eyes. "Attach your lines. I will answer." Silent Cut stood even taller, a tower of Xenoarch in the center of the room. "Dahlia, proceed." Dahlia smiled and walked over, lemon in hand.